Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Part 137 based on novel. So let's start. So it's about this matter. Hua Yuhao finally understood, and said with gratitude, "Thanks, Chiu-Chiu. I'll return and ask eldest senior for permission first." Nan Chiu-Chiu nodded and said, "Alright, I'll go and find my mother too. I'll ask if she's free within this period of time." "Hi, our sect's territory has already been occupied by the Sun Moon Empire. If we return, we must be careful too." Hua Yuhao smiled and said, "No worries, it won't be some kind of death trap. We've already overcome the death god. Do we need to be afraid of ordinary soldiers from the Sun Moon Empire?" Nan Chiu-Chiu laughed and said, "Eldest senior just lectured you, but you've already gone back to your old ways. Aren't you afraid that I'll report you to him?" Hua Yuhao laughed, "I'm not afraid. You aren't that kind of person. You're the most loyal." Nan Chiu-Chiu snorted and said, "It seems like we can only be good brothers in this life." Hua Yuhao chuckled, "It's great to be good brothers. See, I'm so good to my brothers. Alright, I'll find teacher Xian first. We'll talk when we get back." In the next few days, Hua Yuhao was completely busy. His discussion with Xian Ziwen took 6 hours before he invested his energy into developing stationary soul cannon shells. Xian Ziwen handed this job to him. If it were Xian Ziwen, he would find it very easy to complete this task. As for the Earth Dragon sect, Bei Bei allowed him to proceed there after he was done with this task. During the breaks in his experiments, Hua Yuhao wanted to make a trip to the Sea God's Island and ask Elder Xian about a problem he had faced during his cultivation. It was just that he found it difficult to turn his attention away from his experiments after he started on them. He only found the time after he completed all his experiments. After the Class 4 stationary soul cannon shells were completed, they were only 2/3 as strong as normal Class 4 stationary soul cannon shells. However, their effective range was almost the same. This was the result of the materials used. Furthermore, Xian Ziwen was already very pleased that they could make it this far. Hua Yuhao had used a few techniques in their construction. Amongst them, the most important technique was the delayed activation component of the stationary soul cannon shells. When such cannon shells were fired, they normally relied on the thrust at their tail ends to reach far away before exploding. The components that gave them their thrust and power had to be separated using a strong rare metal. The stronger a cannon shell was, the more precious the rare metal needed to separate the components. However, Hua Yuhao went against conventional logic this time in his design. He used a new activation technique. First, as these soul cannon shells were specially designed for Sugar Divine crossbows, Hua Yuhao fully tapped into their thrusting force. The cannons were able to fire the cannon shells around 2 kilometers in distance. If the shells were detonated within these 2 kilometers, a lot of energy is undoubtedly wasted. Hua Yuhao didn't separate the components but placed them together in the same compartment. At the bottom of the cannon shells, he used some mechanical principles and created a delayed activation component. When these shells were fired by the cannons, they would automatically be activated. However, as it didn't have the thrust component, the power component should directly blow apart. However, with the delayed activation component, the power component was meant to blow apart after some time. It would take a few seconds. Within these few seconds, the shell would have flown more than 2 kilometers away. When the power component was about to be detonated, the central detonation component would take effect. The power component was divided into 2 parts. One of these parts was the second thrust component. This second thrust component would increase the speed of the shell once again, reaching the speed of an original Class 4 shell and flying far away. Due to the initial propulsion, it just needed to increase the speed of the shell. In this way, a lot of energy was conserved. Although the strength of the power component was slightly reduced as it was smaller, it was important to remember that the outer shell and mechanical components were made completely from fine iron. It was already very difficult to achieve this. Such a cannon shell would be 2/3 as strong as usual, but its cost would only be 1/10 of normal. This was not even including the fact that some rare metals couldn't be found on the market. It was indeed possible to mass-produce such cannon shells. Of course, Hui Yuhao's research only went this far. Stronger stationary soul tools couldn't be manufactured in this way. This was because they were too strong and needed rare metals for their outer shells. However, adopting this method would undoubtedly help to conserve resources. He had finally finished. Hui Yuhao reported his results to Bei Bei and was excited as he sat in the chair in front of Bei Bei, gulping down water. He was completely tired out over the past half-month. Bei Bei couldn't help but smile when he saw Hui Yuhao's excited look. After Hui Yuhao and the rest returned, they had helped him with a lot of work. He had been much more relaxed over the past half-month. Yuhao, when are you planning to leave since the experiments are done? Bei Bei asked. Hui Yuhao was puzzled as he asked, leave? Where to? Bei Bei was speechless and said, your memory is failing you. Have you forgotten what you promised Chiu Chiu? They are helping us. We can't delay any further. Go and take a look. If it's some kind of precious rare metal, bring it back. Hui Yuhao recalled his conversation with Nan Chiu Chiu that day and was embarrassed as he scratched his head. All right, eldest senior. I'll go over in a day or two. Bei Bei said, all right, you can go in 2 days' time. You should also rest over these 2 days. You can't spend all your time researching in the future. Look at teacher Xian. He's a soul tool maniac right now. Xian Ziwen had become the busiest person in Shrek City. However, it was weird. He managed to become a title dolor amidst all his business. Recently, he was researching his special Class 9 soul tool. Once his research was over, he would become a true Class 9 soul engineer. He would even be stronger than most ordinary Class 9 soul engineers. Hui Yuhao chortled and said, I can't rest. I had some doubts during my cultivation earlier. I still need to ask Elder Xian about them. Eldest senior, I'll leave first if there's nothing else. I'll go to the Sea God's Pavilion straight away. If you want to find me, ask someone to go over there to call me over. After he finished, he quickly rushed out. To him, every minute was precious. His soul power had increased by another rank over the past half-month. He was now a Class 74 Control-type Soul Sage. This increase was a result of his accumulation, as well as his research into the soul power of the Beast God. As he was busy performing experiments, Hui Yuhao didn't manage to improve in his earlier cultivation. But now that the experiments were over, it was time for him to work towards improvements in that area. Yuhao, wash up before going. Bei Bei smiled as he called out to Hui Yuhao from behind. All right. Hui Yuhao acknowledged his words before he disappeared. Bei Bei wore a smile on his face and shook his head helplessly. He gently leaned back in his chair. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something. He pulled the drawer in front of him open and took out a small jade box. Pinkish lights flashed inside this box. It was given to him by the delicate Silk Immortal, and it was one of the 2 valuable treasures needed to save Tang Ya. However, the only problem was that the Blue Silver Emperor had yet to surface until now. Xiao Ya, where are you? How are you doing? Bei Bei's expression turned gentler as he thought of her. However, he was deeply worried. It had already been so long since he had received any news of Tang Ya. Without a doubt, she must have been completely influenced by those evil soul masters and lost her awareness. Bei Bei really wanted to risk everything to find her. He had already secretly decided in his heart that he was going to leave the Tang sect to find her after the 3 soul engineer legions were fully equipped. No matter what price he had to pay, he had to bring her back safely even if he couldn't find the Blue Silver Emperor. Hui Yuhao quickly went to Shrek Academy after leaving the Tang sect. The academy was considered to be in the inner city now. Although Shrek City had expanded, Shrek Academy hadn't. They only added an extra experimental ground outside of the Soul Tool department. Now that war had begun on the continent, even Shrek Academy wasn't completely safe. Apart from the students who were already in the academy, the number of new students was decreasing. If Shrek Academy was already like that, there was no point talking about other academies. Hu Hao went straight to Sea God's Island after entering the academy. When he was outside the Sea God's pavilion, he first kowtowed to the golden tree before going in to find Elder Xian. Elder Xian looked much better than he had the last time they had met. He directly brought Hu Hao to his room to talk to him. Elder Xian. Hu Hao was delighted as he rushed in front of Elder Xian. My experiments have succeeded. We can start manufacturing low-tier Class 4 stationary soul cannon shells now. If we make them in batches, we should be able to surprise the Sun Moon Empire. Elder Xian was in awe as he said, "Oh? You've actually succeeded? You're indeed a genius. It's only been a few days, but Hu Hao has already completed such crucial research. It's even something the Sun Moon Empire can't replicate." After Hu Hao started researching, Bei Bei had already reported his idea to Elder Xian during their regular meetings at the Sea God's Pavilion. Shrek Academy was no longer peaceful after the war started. The conference of the Sea God's Pavilion was meant to be annual, but it was now changed to regular monthly meetings. If there were other special situations, more of such meetings had to be organized. Don't tire yourself out, Hu Hao. You look so worn out. Elder Xian smacked the dust off his shoulders and said concernedly. Hu Hao laughed in embarrassment. Bei Bei's warning fell on deaf ears. He was excited after completing his experiments and was eager to tell Elder Xian everything about the mysteries of soul power. Elder Xian, wasn't I possessed by the beast god Di Qian when I was resisting Elder Yi Shishui? Then, the beast god poured in his strength into my body from afar through spatial power. He descended using my body. Even though my passageways were damaged following that, I managed to understand some certain traits of Di Qian's soul power. When I did my research after that, I found out something strange. Hu Hao recounted his discoveries, along with the details of his experiments to Elder Xian. Elder Xian was still smiling when he first started, and nodding his head from time to time. He was very pleased with Hu Hao's curiosity. However, his expression slowly changed as he continued to listen. He performed high-pressure compression on his soul power and controlled it outside his body, creating a spatial distortion and allowing him to imitate Di Qian's black hole soul power. This kid is too brazen. Elder Xian, whatever knowledge the Academy taught before only applies to Soul Doluo and below. There's no other knowledge beyond Soul Doluo. When one becomes a title Doluo, what kind of changes will happen to his soul power? Is Di Qian's black hole soul power only applicable for ultimate Doluo? In other words, is he the only one with knowledge of it? Although they are both ultimate Doluo, Di Qian was evidently stronger than Elder Yi Shishui. If Yi Shishui doesn't use the Death God, she won't be Di Qian's match in a direct confrontation. Elder Xian silently nodded. He sighed before saying, I didn't expect you to reach this level so quickly. Since you've asked, I guess it's fine that I tell you. You aren't wrong. When a soul master becomes a title Doluo, his soul power will transform from its original fluid state to a solid state. That's the rank 90 bottleneck, and the soul master will obtain his 9th soul ring to become a title Doluo. This is a very difficult bottleneck to break through for most soul masters. This is why there are so many soul Doluo, but a scarcity of title Doluo. There's a very big problem when one soul power changes from a fluid state to a solid state. It's very difficult to cultivate soul power in the solid state. Let's not talk about those soul Doluo who can't transform to become a title Doluo. Let's only talk about title Doluo. You've already sparred with many title Doluo. Have you ever realized that even title Doluo of the same rank can actually differ a lot in their abilities? Hu Hao immediately nodded and said, yes. I've discovered this point. Isn't this because of one's martial soul? Elder Xian smiled and said, that's right. It has some relation to one's martial soul. The stronger one's martial soul is, the better he is able to unleash the strength of it when he combines it with his soul power. However, you might know about something. The stronger one's martial soul is, the greater the amount of soul power during cultivation. This is because one's martial soul can contain a part of his soul power. The stronger a martial soul, the greater the amount of soul power it can store. One can store a portion of his soul power in his martial soul. Hou Yuhao was astonished. He really did not know about this. Elder Xian smiled and said, yes. You should be realizing it now. A soul master can unleash his martial soul true body if he's at least a soul sage. His martial soul true body can help him to store some of his soul power. You'll only learn such knowledge in the academy if you're at least a soul sage. You didn't realize it because the amount of soul power you have is already greater than other soul masters of the same rank. Don't forget, you have twin martial souls. Hou Yuhao pondered, then asked, does this mean that it is very difficult for a titled Doluo to improve further when his soul power reaches a solid state? Elder Xian smiled and nodded lightly, that's right, you're correct. The reason is also very simple. If your soul power is in the gaseous or liquid state, it can flow inside your body. Now, let me ask you, can your soul power still flow if it's in a solid state? Hou Yuhao was stunned for a moment and subconsciously shook his head. Yes. How can one's soul power flow inside his body if it's in a solid state? Elder Xian said, your research is going in the right direction. In fact, the situation that you've laid out is exactly the soul core that only appears for titled Doluo. It refers to the core of soul power, the foundation of a titled Doluo. Soul power is compressed from a fluid state to a solid state, which is then immersed in the dantian of a soul master. That is the soul core. The soul core evolves continuously, and will absorb external soul power through the soul master for the soul master to use. Whether it is in terms of fighting strength or recovery ability, the soul master will be stronger than before. However, it is much more difficult to improve once one's soul power solidifies compared to when it's in the fluid or gaseous state. This is because a human can't possibly circulate solid soul power through his body. This is why a human can only dissect the solid soul power in his body into beads before controlling the circulation of his soul power in the gaseous or fluid state. Not only is this process difficult, but it is also very dangerous. As a result, some soul masters who didn't think that they were talented would give up on further improvements after they became titled Doluo. They would remain at rank 91. This is very safe for them. It's actually so complicated? Hou Yuhao was shocked when he heard that. Elder Xian continued, saying, however, it's not entirely true that soul power can't circulate in one's body in the solid state. If a soul master's spiritual power is strong enough that he can control the beads of soul power to appear in the gaseous or fluid state, he can naturally circulate his soul power. Given this, solid, fluid and gaseous states could possibly exist together. To control one's soul power at this level, one can only be a transcendent Doluo. As a result, after becoming a transcendent Doluo, cultivation might actually become easier. At least there's a correct cultivation method. Of course, transcendent Doluo would still find it difficult to improve. There's a limit to how much soul power a human body can handle. It can still be compressed in the gaseous or fluid state, and it is already highly compressed in the solid state. It can no longer be further compressed. In order to allow one's body to handle more soul power, it comes down to the question that you asked earlier, why does Di Qian's soul power contain such strong spatial power? Di Qian has an 800,000-year cultivation. Although he has not lived in this world for 800,000 years, he has still lived much longer than us. Throughout his entire life, he has been understanding the mysteries of space and time, granting him his current cultivation. No one on the continent can compare to him in this aspect. His soul power, which is every little black hole that you saw, contains an immense amount of compressed soul power. It is stored in his body using time and spatial power, which enables him to handle it. Once a fight breaks out, he can unleash immense fighting strength by controlling his soul power. My current soul power is rank 98. All these years, I've been troubled by how to control that spatial power and stabilize it after compressing my soul power. I can perform some simple control of spatial power. Come, take a look. As he spoke, Elder Xian stretched out his hand, and a ball of yellow light appeared out of nothing in his palm. It was a yellow ball of light, which looked very real. There were thin spatial cracks around it. Earth-type soul power. This was clearly Elder Xian's solidified soul power. Elder Xian's eyes brightened. Suddenly, the spatial cracks that surrounded the ball started to widen, and the ball started to collapse inward. A small black hole was formed. A terrifying suction force dragged Hui Yuhao toward it, and he almost knocked into Elder Xian. After that black hole formed, it started to revolve at high speed. The origin energy in the air started to be sucked into the black hole. The yellow light on Elder Xian's body became more intense. The little black hole stabilized as it was surrounded by a layer of gentle yellow light. It stopped spinning faster, but revolved at a constant speed. This is roughly how it is in Di Qian's body. He uses his own soul power to cause a collapse in space, forming a black hole that can devour origin energy. Theoretically speaking, this black hole can continuously devour origin energy. However, there would be instability if I can't control it, which would eventually lead to an explosion. I heard Elder Mu mention that if an ultimate Doluo can complete a black hole and maintain it at a limit that he can handle, the black hole would be able to remain indefinitely. In that case, this black hole can even devour our entire continent. Of course, such a possibility is very rare. Elder Mu was only making deductions too. Such a black hole soul power would require immense spiritual power to be controlled. After it's controlled, it can be absorbed into one's body. I can complete such a process, but I can't transform my soul power in that way like Di Qian. Currently, there's only one black hole of soul power in my body right now. It's my soul core. The soul power that's flowing in my body is still existing in 3 states. If I can transform 1/10 of the soul power in my body into a black hole, I can create a second black hole soul core, possibly in my chest or brow, thereby becoming an ultimate Doluo. However, it's not easy. I've already tried many times, but I've always missed by a bit. Compared to substituting my soul power, creating a second soul core is easier. Elder Mu and Long Xiaoyao both took this path. I think Yi Shishui did the same too. Only Di Qian took a different path. This is why he is much stronger than most ordinary ultimate Doluo. Furthermore, I suspect that Di Qian has a second soul core. His abilities are already close to that of a god. If you're human, he might have been accepted by the godly realm already. Hui Yuhao listened very seriously. To him, such knowledge was simply too important. This has also allowed him to clearly see his future path of development. Elder Xian smiled and said, "Yuhao, it's much easier for you to become an ultimate Doluo compared to us. This is because you have twin martial souls. Remember, you must aim to achieve double soul cores the moment you become a titled Doluo. As long as you can form black holes with those 2 soul cores, you can easily overcome the barrier to becoming an ultimate Doluo. Hi, it's a pity that time is not on our side. If you had another 30 years to become an ultimate Doluo, why would we be afraid of Yi Shishui and Long Xiaoyao? An ultimate Doluo with twin martial souls would be much stronger than both of them. You could even possibly challenge Di Qian." Hui Yuhao said, "Elder Xian, how can soul power be stabilized as it transforms into a black hole? In my experiments, I found myself losing control before the revolution of my soul power had generated sufficient spatial power. The key lies in my fear. I feared that I would suffer some kind of backlash once I lost control. This is why I don't even know what my limit is." Elder Xian laughed and said, "Fool, don't be too ambitious. You're only a soul sage right now. Even though you have twin martial souls, you're still a soul sage. You can't possibly form a soul core right now. However, you have a very great advantage over other soul masters. Because of this advantage, I'm confident that you can directly form double soul cores when you become a titled Doluo." "Are you talking about my spiritual power?" Hui Yuhao immediately understood what Elder Xian meant. Elder Xian nodded and replied, "That's right, it's your spiritual power. Your spiritual power is greater than most other ordinary soul masters, comparable to a titled Doluo. There are very few spiritual-type soul masters, but a spiritual-type titled Doluo will most certainly become a transcendent Doluo. This is because spiritual-type soul masters have greater control than most ordinary soul masters. It's fine for you to carry out such experiments right now. At least you'll get to accumulate experience. However, don't be too fixated on it. You can't help it if your abilities aren't up to par. As your soul power is insufficient, you can't possibly compress all your soul power inside your soul core when you change it from the fluid to the solid state. The bigger the soul core, the stronger the title Dolor. Hui Yuhao was moved, and asked, Elder Xian, if I try to form a soul core right now, what might happen? Elder Xian was stunned for a moment, then smiled. First, it's almost impossible. While your control might be strong, it's very difficult to control spatial power. If things go wrong, you'll be courting your own death. During the process of carrying out soul power compression, the demands on a soul master's physical tenacity are very great. One's body is like a container that stores soul power, whereas the transformation of soul power from a fluid to a solid state will generate immense energy. If your body isn't strong enough, you'll blow apart and die. This is why you can't just try for fun. Assuming you really succeed, your future cultivation is bound to increase significantly. A solid soul core absorbs origin energy at a much faster speed than your meditation right now. However, what will happen when you reach rank 90? You already have one soul core and you can't possibly compress all your soul power inside it. When you reach rank 90, you'll need to attempt the compression of your second soul core. It's only in this way that you'll become a titled Dolor. However, your soul core will definitely appear in your Dantian. There's a very high possibility that your first soul core will form in your Dantian as well. There's also a possibility that you can form two at the same time. However, if there's already one soul core in your Dantian, you'll have to take a look at my condition if you want to form a second soul core somewhere else. Elder Xian was a little helpless as he pointed to himself. Hui Yuhao understood what he meant. According to Elder Xian, assuming that he did the impossible and formed a first soul core, it would be as difficult for him to form a second soul core as it was to become an ultimate Dolor from a rank 98 transcendent Dolor. I understand. Thank you. Hui Yuhao nodded gently. Elder Xian said, didn't you say you wanted to challenge your limits earlier? You can try. I'll watch over you. I would also like to see how good your control is. I suggest you try with 1/10 of your soul power. When your soul power reaches the solid state and continues to increase until you feel like you can't control it anymore, I'll be here. Don't worry. I'll ensure your safety. Hui Yuhao was delighted, thanks Elder Xian. Shall I start now? Yes, you can start now. Hui Yuhao first calmed himself down and adjusted his state of mind. He shut his eyes, and his spiritual power started to flow. He also checked his soul power in his body. Elder Xian stood by one side and silently nodded. This kid is still as composed as ever. He's not lost his cool at all. When Hui Yuhao opened his eyes again, his eyes were already covered with a layer of gold. He slowly lifted his right hand, and his milky white soul power started to flow out. As his soul power was in the fluid state, it looked like a puddle of milk in his palm. None of his soul power seeped out of his hand as he controlled it using his spiritual power. More and more of his soul power started to appear and drift above Hui Yuhao's palm. It was slowly revolving. This time, Hui Yuhao had poured out more soul power than he did the previous 2 times in his experiments. With Elder Xian protecting him, he naturally didn't need to worry too much. Under his control, the circulation of his soul power started to increase in speed. At the same time, it also started to slowly compress. During the process of compression, Hui Yuhao slowly increased the input of his soul power. His fluid soul power started to become viscous, but its speed kept on increasing under Hui Yuhao's intentional control. There was a layer of gold surrounding his white soul power. It was this layer of gold that protected his soul power from seeping away. If it were any other 7-ringed soul master, his soul power would quickly vaporize if he let his soul power out of his body just like that without using any soul skills. After vaporizing, his soul power would then vanish into the air. Elder Xian nodded in approval as he watched Hui Yuhao's control of his spiritual power. Even though this didn't drain too much of his spiritual power, there was a very great demand on detail. It wasn't easy for Hui Yuhao to do something like this. His soul power was slowly transforming from the fluid to the solid state. Hui Yuhao's expression also started to turn serious. However, his soul power didn't shift in the slightest under his control. It continued to constantly revolve. It had finally transformed into the solid state. It was very difficult to imagine a soul sage doing this. Elder Xian was in awe, and also became more focused. He was ready to react to any situation. Hui Yuhao's soul power kept on compressing and revolving. Slowly, his solid soul power took form. The little funnel that Hui Yuhao was familiar with appeared. As he had poured more soul power into it this time, the appearance of the funnel caused a greater suction of origin energy from outside compared to before. The terrifying suction force directly spread outward. Inside the sea god's pavilion, origin energy was in abundance. Suddenly, Hui Yuhao felt as if the energy from this little whirlpool had increased at a rate that was at least twice as quick compared to the previous 2 experiments. Distorted lights around his solid soul power started to become more and more evident. The intense suction force didn't just suck in origin energy. It was also absorbing Hui Yuhao's own soul power. Hui Yuhao had no choice but to continuously pour his soul power into it to enhance the strength of his solid soul power. Very good, continue. Don't worry. Let me see what standard you can reach. Elder Xian's voice sounded in Hui Yuhao's ears, alleviating his worries. However, he didn't immediately increase the output of his soul power. Rather, he allowed his soul power to absorb the soul power in his body. At the same time, he kept on strengthening the control of his spiritual power in a bid to maintain the stability of his solid soul power. Elder Xian had mentioned before that he had to maintain the stability of his solid soul power if he wanted to make it his soul core. Once stability was lost, a huge explosion would ensue. That would be very perilous. Under Hui Yuhao's intentional control, his solid soul power started to stabilize, as well as continuing to strengthen. The surge of origin energy also became faster and faster. Hui Yuhao even saw dim gold appearing on the walls in the room. The golden tree was absorbing origin energy from the outside world just as it was pouring out origin energy. This went to show that Hui Yuhao's solid soul power was absorbing origin energy at an immensely quick rate. Elder Xian's body lit up with a layer of dim golden light, isolating him from the outside world. This was because Hui Yuhao's solid soul power was already starting to absorb his own soul power. However, Elder Xian was able to isolate it, given that there was a huge difference in their cultivations. A mysterious look slowly appeared across Hui Yuhao's face. On his forehead, his eye of destiny had already slowly opened. He increased the output of his spiritual power once again and continued to control the revolution of his solid soul power with stability. Seconds passed, and more than half of Hui Yuhao's soul power had already fused into this solid soul power. He also started to feel that he was slowly losing control of the revolution of this solid soul power. His spiritual control was still maintaining its stability. However, it was impossible for him to stop it anymore. If he did so, there would only be one result, an explosion. This video will end here.